So, so today I want to talk a little bit about history, time, and queerness in Chinese Canadian literature. In Dissemination, Time, Narrative, and the Margins of the Modern Nation, Homi Bhabha suggests that we consider the nation as a temporal process, and the construction of racialized history travels in an uninterrupted time of homogeneity and linearity. And a novel that spans from the building of the Canadian Pacific Railway to Chinese Exclusion Act to the 1980s. Disappearing Moon Cafe remains a witness to the history of racialized violence against the Chinese Canadian family in the novel. At the center of the novel is a narrator, Kai's longing for the Chinese Canadian history and her various attempts to unearth the truth as it narrates how 4 generations of Chinese Canadian women navigate a woman hating world. With multiple temporalities that juxtapose her attempt to tell history, along with pieces of the family's past, memories are neither linear or sequential. Through Kai, presented in the novel, are ways in which Sky Lee, the author, remembers, tells, and creates the Chinese Canadian past, present, and the future. So, in a story invested in time, essentially every character deviates from the normativity that underscores the family tree, and Lee conveys these deviations in temporal terms. While each section of the novel is titled with a character's name and a specific year, Kai nevertheless has difficulties telling time. Her story begins when the contact with the past for her still means quote-unquote applying attention to all the important events such as the births and the deaths. However, a neat family tree with a crisp beginning and a well-penned conclusion does not exist in this case. And there are reasons why the attention to temporality remains central. The novel begins with the construction of the railway, which is predominantly related to speed, progress, and modernization. But the images that follow in the book, ghosts, long-dead figures, scattered bones along the railway, bring in a heavy sense of obsolescence, and such temporal duality sums up the exploitable nature of Chinese labor, for whom time functions differently, with the juxtapositions of both the modern and the primitive. In Time, Work Discipline, and Industrial Capitalism, E. P. Thompson thinks of time as an invention of the human mind, and he argues that men are converted to specific valuations of time in industrial capitalism. And in a mature capitalist society, according to him, all time must be consumed, marketed, and put to use. So, old overseas Chinese in the novel who never wasted anything, nor their time nor their leisure, therefore seem to represent such mature capitalist society. However, the highly capitalized Chinese labor bodies are immediately forgotten when the railway is done. And focusing on such duality, Aiko Day suggests that Chinese labor is rendered abstract qualities of capital, and the heterogeneous labor is reduced to the homogeneous equivalence of money, which is excluded from normative social and domestic temporalities. Time, therefore, is further racialized and sexualized for Chinese Canadians, the socially non-reproductive ghosts in the settler society, which in this case is Canada. And ghosts remain figures that cannot be contained by the white heteronormative temporalized discipline, and such ghostly encounters culminate in the novel in the section Feeding the Dead, in which Kai faces a past with all her female ancestors, and she brings them together with a serial chant. And none of the female characters in the novel in Chinatown are fully in control of their own sexuality, with their bodies reduced to maximum reproductive function only. However, as Sky Lee frames this section between the unveiling of the 2 deepest secrets in the family leading to most tragedies, the adultery and the incest, it is a section animated by excessive and deviating sexual desires. And as the only woman who is not directly related to the family drama but also appears here in this section, Premier Chow, the outsider, Kai's potential female lover, brings in her own conspicuous sexual energy, described by Kai as like a newborn baby with her angelic face. She is constantly constructed as a child figure with her innocent rawness and her dreamy quality. But she is not just an infantile subject, a misplaced bastard daughter of a gangster and his mob. Hermia is also placed at the margin of any society marked by her deviant parentage, her over-sexuality, and her as thin as a relationship to the world around her as she could get away with, and all speak to her anti-relational traits. And such duality also hints Kai's remark about Hermia's dual personality. Her hair that is too short further renders her androgynous quality. Here Hermia remains the unspoken drive that animates Kai's desire to write down the family story and set the Wang daughters free. She speaks to what Elizabeth Freeman calls the asocial mode of relationality, that is, counter to marriage, kinship, and reproduction. So with Hermia's queer sensuality, her cry that the world is drying up, and her face that is floating wet and free, Hermia is like water to the dry land of the woman whose sexuality have long been repressed. And in her article Queer Belongings, Elizabeth Freeman describes queerness as a volitional positioning of the self in history, and she states that queer belonging named the longing to belong, to endure in corporeal form over time beyond procreation, and to want to belong is to long to be bigger not only spatially but also temporally, to hold out a hand across time and touch the dead or those not born yet, to offer oneself beyond one's own time, and that hand therefore remains quintessential to reorganize relations between the past and the present for Kai as a writer to write. And as she attempts to massage the complexities of the family into a digestible unit using hands, she has aligned the writing of history with the corporeal since the very beginning. And this corporeal encounter of the woman in this family is consummated in the moment as Kai holds out a hand across space and time to evoke them and bring them together. And in the novel, when the wailing woman, alive and deceased, huddle together, they are reconnected, quote unquote, hand in hand, both metaphorically and physically. So, gathering around the timeless circular table with no beginning or ending, all the women here are presented in a horizontal way instead of the vertical hierarchy of a family tree that has been defining their whole life to reproduce the patriarchal clan. And when tears from their own time periods join together according to Kai's design in the novel, the transient and the obsolescence nevertheless turns into the timelessness, forming new connections among their psyches and bodies. And with the dissolution of hierarchical boundaries, the affective bodies of women are no longer marked by the use of time to organize individual human bodies towards a maximum productivity and reproductivity. The women who do not have enough time or choice when they're alive finally get plenty of time to dwell on matters such as love, desire, and sexuality that is able to break the reproductive or genealogical time. And as Kai speaks the dead, she becomes an individual who, as the novel remarks, is not an individual at all, but a series of individuals which further unsettles the established forms of connection to the past and the present. And when Kai, with her de-individualization as one individual thinking collectively, describes what she wants to live, describes that she wants to live a great novel instead of writing one. She is no longer stuck in the past and instead becomes all her maternal ancestors, which points to, again, what Elizabeth Freeman depicts as erotohistoriography, a corporeal counter-history that does not write the lost subject into the present so much as encounter it already in the present by treating the present itself as hybrid, and the potentiality of generations of Chinese Canadian women in the novel is therefore recovered through these alternative ways as a counter-history of female sexuality. Instead of the past repeatedly invading the present, such encounter through the conflation of time and space rather than inheritance or succession allows the present to enter the past and open up a future. And the novel's most straight marriages are unfortunate and even disastrous. Therefore, the female love and the utopic future between Kai and Hermia invites further investigation. So Kai's story ends with her overseas phone call to Hermia in Hong Kong and their plan that they will live happily ever after when Kai leaves Canada for Hong Kong. And it is never indicated actually whether she has successfully landed in Hong Kong. It is more like a journey of not yet here, and such ending offers an impulse towards what the queer scholar Jose Munoz calls the queer utopianism, a notion that envisages a spatial temporal realm that is not here yet, but with its world-making capacity provides a horizon of possibility to reimagine the future. And what is pictured here is an affective bond of women in a land with political possibilities for queer desire across time, space, and race. And in this queer moment of storytelling, we find not only the possibility for female love and desire, but also the opportunity for a transgressive future that gestures towards a process that is unsettled and constantly in flux. So to conclude, temporal complexities of the novel challenge the single overarching trajectory of progress fraught with displacement and racialized and sexualized violence that excluded Chinese Canadians from the concept of the nation at the very beginning. And the queer plot between Kai and Hermia in the end blurs geographical, racial, and sexual boundaries in the diasporic formation, and places Sky Lee's writing at the intersection of both the real, the historical, and the imaginary, the utopian, with desires and identifications that move beyond heteropatriarchal boundaries and national belongings. And that's all, thank you. And these are some of the works references. Yeah, thank you.